So Simon, one of the things you talk about in the book is when presentations and communications really go wrong. And I think one of the stories you tell is a story about NASA, which is great. So I wonder if you can tell us that.
Poor old NASA, poor old PowerPoint really. So obviously with the awful Challenger shuttle disaster of a few years ago, there was quite rightly a lot of sort of review as to the processes leading up to that. And one of the stress points in that whole process leading to that awful loss of life was the way that the issues and potential problems were communicated within NASA. And they used PowerPoints. And they used PowerPoint in the worst way possible. So they'd summarize stuff, they'd put too much information on certain slides, assume that the audience had taken on board what they thought was being shared. And in this whole morass of mistakes and presentation sort of missteps, what happened was that some really key elements were missed. And in the wash-up afterwards, there was lots of finger pointing saying, well, this demonstrates that PowerPoint is an awful communication tool. And in the wrong hands, used in the wrong way, it's awful. It's a dreadful tool. But used properly, appropriately, in the right way to the right type of audience, it's brilliant. And it's akin to blaming Word for bad speeches or bad articles. You don't blame the software, just as you shouldn't blame PowerPoint. But it's one of those apocryphal stories now that have come up where it demonstrates allegedly that PowerPoint dumbs information down. It doesn't. It just makes that easier if the user of the technology isn't using it appropriately.
And that's a good point, isn't it? Because even putting PowerPoint to one side, if you're giving a presentation of 40 minutes, 50 minutes length, even actually shorter, could be 20 minutes of length, but how do you ensure that the key points, the key bits that you're trying to deliver, because the message is always kind of massaged with other things as well, isn't it? Otherwise it'd be a 1-minute presentation. So how do you ensure that the key takeaways are in fact the things that are taken away? Because clearly in the NASA example, one of the key takeaways was completely missed.
Spot on. And we talk a lot about clutter within presentations, and clutter comes from content. Most presentations get gummed up by there being too much content in there. And the way to get around that is really simple. If you take a step back, we can all figure this out for ourselves. And it's about ensuring that you have the right message in place in the first place. So what message do you want to transfer over to your audience as part of that presentation? And by transferring that message, and make sure it's super, super clear, once you've got a clear message, the content kind of picks itself. And that's the key to this, is if you start with the message, the content picks itself, which means you can get rid of all of the other clutter that gums up the presentation. And then you can worry about the fun stuff, which is how do I visualize it? But it all centers around a clear message, because it's a message that your audience will remember. God forbid they remember how good your slides were. That's not the purpose of the presentation. The purpose of the presentation is that the message was clearly communicated to the audience.
And what do you do, therefore, when you've got a slot to fill? Because I think one of the problems that people have is, you're told you have 45 minutes. And of course they could get